The Legend of Zelda. Come with us now to another world, another dimension, where they are humans living there, but also land filled with monsters, magic, and adventure. Calatia, a very small kingdom a few hundred miles west of Hyrule, across a channel. Calatia was a powerful kingdom, but small, and a young man who was 15 years old named Link had been recently knighted, but unfortunately they had no need of other knights there. So Link, like many of the young knights that came before him, had to go out to other kingdoms to find jobs. Well, young Link finally got his paperwork, allowing him to go to Hyrule. He tells the good news to his parents, who were very happy for him, and then he packs the things and leaves the family estate to Hyrule to start his new job and his new life as a knight. Eventually, Link arrives to the port, shows his paperwork, boards the ship bound for Hyrule, and the ship sets sail. Meanwhile, in Hyrule, a beautiful kingdom surrounded by mountains and forests was having its share of troubles. For centuries, an evil demonic entity named Ganon had been menacing the kingdom, and now he had waged a full-scale attack on Hyrule Castle. The castle was being besieged by his monstrous minions, anthropomorphic bulldog-looking creatures called moblins, wolf-looking creatures called Goroyas, animated skeletons of dead warriors called Stalfos, and a whole cadre of other horrifying monstrous creatures. Well, the king and his knights and men-at-arms and other warriors were fighting the monsters at the parapets as they had finally breached the wall. Meanwhile, in the center of the castle was Princess Zelda. She was a young 18-year-old woman. She was beautiful, she had straight, long brown hair, and she had blue eyes. And she was not too concerned about the attack. Her nursemaid, Impa, was a short, older woman, near 70. She had long, white hair, braided, and she had been Zelda's nursemaid since she was a baby. In fact, she had been nursemaid for most of the female members of the royal family since she was young. Well, she asked Zelda, what about the Triforce? Is it safe? And then Zelda says, yes, the fragment of wisdom is safe. I split it into 3 and I hidden it across several underworld dungeons away from Ganon's reach. And then she asked the princess, but how are we going to get out? And then Zelda says, I don't think we're going to get out. I anticipate my capture. I foresaw it, she says to the nursemaid. And then she tells her nursemaid, Impa, listen to me. I need you to go and find somebody who could find the 3 pieces of the Triforce of Wisdom and defeat Ganon. I saw him, she says to Impa, and she describes to Impa what he would look like. He is a man of 15 years old, she says to her, and she further describes this young man. He has brown eyes, he is about 5'9", he has brown curly hair, and he's wearing, I think, green, along with a brownish orangish color to his clothing, she says. And then suddenly they were interrupted by one of the young knights named William. Sir William runs up to the princess and he says to her, Your Majesty, I have orders from your father to take you to safety. Come on, there has to be another way out of here. And then Zelda says to Sir William, yes, there is another way out. Come on, I know the way. So Zelda guided Sir William and Impa to the throne room, and there in the giant decorative mantelpiece behind the throne lay a secret passage that was opened when Zelda activated a hidden switch that caused the giant mantelpiece to slide to the left. The 3 ran into the secret passageway as the mantelpiece closed behind them. They eventually made their way out behind the castle, where all of a sudden they were greeted by Ganon himself. And Ganon says to the princess,
Ah, Zelda, I have been waiting for you. You finally have arrived.
Zelda screams, no! And Impa also screams in terror. And then Sir William reveals himself to be a traitor, and Zelda says, "William, how could you?" But before the traitorous knight could reveal his motives, Ganon thanked him by zapping him with an energy ball that caused Sir William's flesh to burn off, only leaving his charred bones and armor, effectively turning William into a Stalfos. Impa ran the opposite direction, while Ganon charged his minions that were with him to run after her. And then he used his magic by zapping Zelda with an energy bolt, knocking her out. He grabs the unconscious princess, puts her over his shoulder, gets on his black horse, and then he teleports off. After the princess was captured, then Ganon's forces retreat from the attack, leaving the king bewildered to why they suddenly stopped their siege and retreated. And then it dawned on the king, "Oh no, my daughter, my daughter." He runs into the castle and couldn't find Zelda at all, and then he assumed the worst, that she was captured by Ganon. Meanwhile, Ganon reappears at the summit of Death Mountain in his palace hidden within the peak. He was riding his black steed down the narrow rocky roadway leading up to his palace, and there, lined up by the doorway, were his minions cheering him on as they were celebrating his capture of the princess. Several hours later, at sea, near the coastline of Hyrule, the ship was receiving a light signal, and Link had seen it. It was a flickering light coming from the coast, delivering Morse code. The ship had one itself and was transmitting light signals back to the source. And the man operating the light machine wrote down everything that he received from the coast and gave it to the captain. The captain reads it, and then he says aloud to everybody, "Ladies and gentlemen, there has been an attack on Hyrule Castle, and all ports of entry have been closed except for one." Everybody was upset, and the captain goes on to explain, "It's okay, people, we're going to pull in to Fort Hyrule." And he goes on to explain its location, which was south of Death Mountain. And soon the ship pulls into the sea fort, and everybody walks off the ship. And then they go into the fort, and everyone gets their paperwork processed, including Link. Since Link was going to work out there, he was given a residency card, and he was told by the man at the desk that they might need him. So Link reports for duty to the base commander, who gives him little assignments here and there. And one of his assignments was going to be patrolling the area around the fort. Meanwhile, in Ganon's lair in Death Mountain, Princess Zelda was taken to her prison cell. She was thrown onto the ground, and Ganon, with his magic, causes a wall of flame to surround her where she was laying at, and he says to her,
"I will free you, princess, if you tell me the location of the pieces of the Triforce of Wisdom."
and she says to Ganon, "No, I will never tell you." And then Ganon says to her, "Fine, you will rot here." And then he leaves. Then Ganon enters a giant chamber. The monstrous sorcerer, who resembles a anthropomorphic warthog, says to his minions,
"Find me the pieces of the Triforce of Wisdom. Look in every corner of the underworld. Leave no stone unturned. Do not rest until you find them."
After his minions leave, the wizard turns around to see the one piece of the Triforce he did have, the Triforce of Power. It was glowing red, and it was floating on a pedestal that was underneath a giant jar full of purple smoke that was whirling about inside. And he says aloud to himself,
"Soon I will have the Triforce of Wisdom, and then I will be a step closer to uniting the complete Triforce, and once that is done, I will have ultimate power."
As Ganon was saying that, he held up his right arm, and he was looking at his right hand, and on the back of his hand was a mark. It was not a tattoo, but this mark was that of a triangle, and the triangle seemed to be divided into three pieces, and the bottom left of the triangle was red, while the other parts were gray. That symbolized his possession of the Triforce of Power. Meanwhile, outside a mile from the fort, Link was patrolling the area. As he was patrolling, he heard the screams of a woman. Link readies himself as he unsheaths his sword and runs towards the direction of the scream. Link arrives and he sees the old nursemaid Impa being attacked by a few moblins. Link quickly jumps into action and kills all the moblins. Afterwards, Link runs to see if the old woman was okay, and Impa says, "Oh yes, young man, I'm okay, thank you. Thank you very much." And as Impa looks at Link's face and sees how Link was dressed, she says, "Oh dear God in heaven, it's you." Link, confused, asks Impa, "Excuse me, madam, do I know you?" And then Impa says, "No, but the princess, you were in her vision. Please take me to the fort." And then Link says, "Okay, madam, I'll help you to the fort." And he helps Impa to the fort. Soon they arrive to the fort, and he takes Impa to a small inn that was in the fort. The inn had a tavern on the ground level, and Link takes Impa to the tavern portion of the inn and sits her at a empty table, and he asks the bartender to give her some bread and some water. He complies, and Impa quickly wolfs down the bread and gulps the water. She now had her strength back, and she begins to ask Link questions. The first question she asks Link, "What is your name, young man?" And Link says, "I am Link. I am from Calatia. I came here to Hyrule to look for a job." And then Impa says, "Oh, you come to the right place. I have a job for you, young man." And then she asks Link the next question, "How old are you, boy?" And then Link says, "I am 15, ma'am." And Impa says, "Okay." And then she asked the third question, "Do you know the royal family?" she asked. And then Link says, "No, ma'am, this is my first time in the kingdom." And then she asked the final question to Link, "Then, young man, do you know the Triforce?" Link says, "I am not familiar with the religious customs of this country," he says to her. And then Impa's like, "Well, I'm going to explain everything to you, young man. You better pay attention," she says to Link. And then she goes on to explain to Link about the Triforce. She says to Link, "Well, right now, everybody believes that the Triforce is a holy relic created by the great Mother Goddess after she created everything, the universe, the angels, her son Mithra, and the earth," she goes on to say to Link. Then she says to Link, "That is all false. The Triforce was not made by the Mother Goddess. It was made by three ancient goddesses, the goddesses who ruled Hyrule before the coming of the one goddess." And then she goes on to explain further to Link. There were three ancient goddesses by the name of Din, Furor, and Nehru. And she goes on to explain to Link, after the three goddesses created the earth, life, and everything else, they departed back to the heavens where they came from, and they made the Triforce. The Triforce contains a tiny piece of their essences, and each part of the Triforce represents one goddess. The Triforce piece of wisdom represents Din, who was the goddess of wisdom, and the piece of power represented Furor, who was a goddess of power, and finally, the piece of courage represented Nehru, who was the goddess of courage. And when all three pieces are together, the Triforce is a force to be reckoned with. Unfortunately, she continues to explain to Link, the Triforce is an inanimate object, so it cannot judge between the actions of the one who possesses it. And then she says to Link, and in the right hands, the Triforce can heal, it could bring prosperity, it could bring life to any place. But in the wrong hands, the Triforce can bring death and destruction and eternal darkness. Then the bartender interrupted them and says to Link aloud, "Ah, boy, don't listen to that old Korok woman. Her people still believe in the old faith." And he goes on to further insult Impa, "And her people are the lowest people there is." Link quickly begins to defend Impa and was starting to get very loud and starting to show his anger towards the bartender. Then Impa says, "No, young man, no. Forget it. Forget about these people. They laugh at my people, but I descend from the Sheikah," she says to Link. And she goes on to explain to Link, "My people, the Korok, descended from a once great and powerful race in Hyrule called the Sheikah." And then she says to Link, "The Sheikah were once great keepers of knowledge and wielded great magical ability. They're all gone now. We Korok are those who are left. We haven't forgotten our old ways, and we haven't abandoned the goddesses, and this is why Hyrule falls to calamities all the time," she says to Link and to the bartender. And then the bartender says, "Well, anyways, boy, don't listen to her. Everybody knows that the Triforce represents the aspects of the goddess Solace: wisdom, power, courage." Afterwards, the bartender walks away. Then Link asks Impa, "So what's going on here?" And then Impa explains to Link everything. And she says to Link, "Well, young man, a very powerful and ancient evil by the name of Ganon has kidnapped Princess Zelda." And then she goes on to explain to Link, "And he wants the Triforce piece of wisdom." And she says to Link further, "And he has the Triforce piece of power." And she tells Link the story of Ganon. And she says to Link, "Once long ago, thousands of years ago, Ganon was known as Ganondorf Dragmire. He was a thief and king of his own people, the Gerudo, who once lived in the deserts of southeastern Hyrule, but now are long gone." And she says to Link, "Well, the man known as Ganondorf was very power hungry. He coveted the Triforce, and he searched for it until one day he uncovered the realm where the Triforce lay hidden. But since he was not balanced, he could not obtain the full Triforce, and the Triforce split into 3 pieces. And he was only able to maintain the piece of power, and that piece corrupted him. It turned him into what reflected into his heart. And what reflected in his heart was greed and evil, and it turned him to a demonic pig-like monster," she says to Link. And then she goes on to explain to Link, "And now he has been trying to get the Triforce for years. Many had stopped him, but he keeps coming back." And then she says to Link, "But you, young man, you are able to stop him." And Link's like, whoa, me? Ma'am, I just got here. I don't know what's really going on." And then she says to Link, "Listen to me, young man. The princess foresaw Ganon's defeat at the hands of a man who fitted your description. You are the one," she says. And Link says, "Well, I wish I could help you, but ma'am, I'm assigned to this base right now, and I have orders and duties to fulfill, ma'am." And then Impa says, "Oh, don't worry, young man. I'll take care of that." Later on in the day, Link was cleaning out the stables when a soldier comes up to him and says, "Link, the commander wants to see you right now in his office." Link says, "Okay." And then Link arrives to the office, salutes the commander, and the commander says to Link, "Link, I'm relieving you of duties right now," he says to the young knight. And then Link saw that Impa was standing next to the commander, and the commander says to Link, "Link, you're going to work for this woman. She is the nursemaid to the royal family, and she's very highly respected everywhere." And Link says, "Yes, sir, I understand, sir." And then the commander says, "Very good, Link. I wish you luck on your new assignment," he says. And then Link says, "Thank you, sir." Then Impa says, "Come with me, Link." They soon arrive to Impa's room at the inn, and then Impa shows Link a map of Hyrule. And she shows him several marked areas in the map, and she says, "Right here is the locations where the princess hid the fragment of the Triforce piece of wisdom," she says to Link. And then she warns Link that Ganon's forces will be searching that section, and she explains to Link what the underworld was. And Link was amazed about the underworld. And then she says to Link, "Here, Link, take this." And then she gives Link a small bag. It was green like the jerkin he was wearing, and she says to Link, "That's just like the same color of the jerkin you're wearing." And then she explains to Link, "This bag is magical. You can wear it on the side of your belt," she says to him, and she goes on to explain, "It will shrink every object that you put in there. You can hold a huge number of objects, and when you pull them back out, they will grow into size," she says. And now Link begins his journey to find the fragments for the Triforce piece of wisdom. Link made the perilous journey to the first entrance of the underworld. His journey was marred with Ganon's forces out and about in the countryside, from moblins to bokoblins to other bizarre creatures like plants that detach from the ground and spin like helicopter blades chasing Link, and the Goroyas who throw boomerangs at him. Well, Link finally made it to a bridge. The bridge led to an island out in the middle of a vast lake. And as Link began to cross the bridge, suddenly, splashing out of the water were hideous monsters that looked like mermen, and they began to shoot fireballs at Link. Link blocked the first fireball with his shield, and he ran as fast as he could across the long bridge. He finally arrived to the island, and there in the island was a giant dead tree. But he had noticed something strange about this tree. This tree looked like it had a face. Could it have been some sort of living tree once? Its mouth was wide open, forming the entrance into it. So Link prayed for courage, and with his sword drawn out and his shield held tight, Link went inside the giant dead tree, and there he faced the horrors of that underworld. Link fought the moblins that roamed inside, and he fought other monsters that were lurking inside that underworld. Well, as he progressed further and further into the labyrinth, he found a treasure chest. It was huge. He wondered what was inside, so Link opened the treasure chest. Inside the chest was a very well-made bow, and Link picked it up and looked at it, and he's like, "My God, it's a bow. Look at that. Look at the craftsmanship." And then he pulls on the string of the bow, and he says aloud to himself, "Oh, this is definitely what I need." And then Link puts the bow in his magic item bag on his belt, and then Link sees a quiver full of arrows in there. He puts the quiver of arrows on his back, and he proceeded further into the darkness of the labyrinth. Then suddenly he hears a monstrous roar. Link goes to the direction of the roar, and he enters a room, and there in the room he sees a dragon-like creature with one horn on its head like a unicorn. It was none other than the dreaded Aquamentus. And as soon as it saw Link, it began to shoot fireballs at him. Link quickly leapt out the way and rolled. Soon he regained his composure. He knew he could not attack that giant thing head on with his sword. He had to use his brains. Then it dawned on Link, his bow and arrow. Link took cover in the pillars in the chamber where the monster was roaming at. Link hid as the monster searched for him, and Link pulled out his bow that he found, and he grabbed an arrow. And soon he ran in front of the dragon, and the dragon opened its mouth, ready to shoot a fireball at Link, and Link quickly drew the arrow back and shot the arrow into the monster's open mouth. The arrow directly went into the throat of the Aqua Mentius. The Aqua Mentius began to make a choking noise as the arrow went straight into his throat. And suddenly the fireball that was building up in the back of his throat came shooting out and consumed the entire head. And then the monster's head completely blew up in a giant blaze. After the monster's lifeless, headless body fell down on the ground, Link made his way to the other chamber. He had noticed on the ground that the ground was strewn with the bodies of those who tried and failed, especially those of Ganon's minions. Link went into the other chamber, and there in that chamber he saw a giant green glowing object. It was the fragment of the Triforce piece of wisdom. Link quickly walked over to it and grabbed it. He felt a bizarre feeling coming over him, and then that fragment disappeared. Link didn't question it, but he also noticed there were other things in that room, other treasures. He grabbed what he could. Mainly, it was a mysterious but cool-looking boomerang, and he also saw a mysterious bracelet that looked like it was made of bronze. Link grabbed that and put it on his right wrist. And then he grabbed his purse and filled it up with some golden rupees. After he was done, Link exits the underworld labyrinth. He was back out on the surface, and he now made his way to the second underworld labyrinth. Link finally arrived to the Kokiri Forest, where the second labyrinth was. And the Kokiri Forest was mysterious. Link felt like there was a pervasive evil presence around. He couldn't shake it, but the forest was full of flying fairies, and he could sometimes hear the laughter of children somewhere in the distance. As Link finally made his way to the second labyrinth, it was in a giant old temple. It sat in the heart of the forest, covered in vines and moss. And Link walked up the old stone stairway. It was slippery from all the moss on it. Well, as he walked into the foreboding temple, he heard a loud, monstrous roar. Once again, Link mustered up courage and went towards the roar. He had noticed that this temple was particularly empty. Ganon's forces were not crawling all over it like the last place. And soon he arrived to the lower depths of the temple, and there he was in a chamber, and he saw many Ganon's minions strewn out on the ground dead. As Link wondered what killed them, he heard the sound of a distant crawling. Then Link saw it. It looked like a giant spider creature with one giant eye, and it came right up to Link. It was at least 10 to 15 foot tall, and as soon as it saw Link, it quickly doubled back and started to crawl onto the wall and up the ceiling. Without thinking twice, Link pulled out his newly acquired boomerang, and he took aim at the monster, and he flung it. The boomerang seemed to be magical in property, as the boomerang homed into the monster's giant eye, and it hit it with such force and speed that the monster fell from the ceiling. Once the monster was on the ground on its back, Link quickly grabbed his sword after he retrieved the boomerang that came back to him and ran towards that creature, and then he held his sword high and he stabbed the creature in the eye with his sword full force. The creature let out a monstrous roar, and then it quickly gets back up and starts crawling around blindly. It couldn't see where it's going. Eventually the monster fell off a cliff into a bottomless pit at the very far end of the chamber. Link can only see as the monster fell to its death with Link's sword still embedded in its eye. Link said aloud, "Oh, just great, now I got no sword." Well, Link went into the next chamber where he found the second fragment of the Triforce piece of wisdom. and he grabbed it. As soon as he grabbed that fragment, the second fragment of the Triforce appeared, floating in the air. And then Link grabbed that one, and he put the two fragments together, and they clicked like a puzzle piece. Then there was a bright green flash, and it disappeared. Link made his way back out to the temple, where he was greeted by a group of children. The children were all dressed in green, and then they all were looking at Link, and they were giggling. There was one among them who stood out, a little girl. Her hair was completely green, and she says to Link, "You there, you killed the Goma." And Link said, "Oh, that's what that thing was called, the Goma?" And the little girl said, "Yes." And then she says, "I sensed that the Goma had killed all the intruders in the temple. They were looking for what you were looking for, that fragment of the Triforce piece of wisdom." And Link said to the little girl, "You know about it?" And the little girl said yes, and she explained everything to Link. And then she finally introduces herself, and she says, "I am Saria. I am the attendant and priestess of the sacred grove," she says to Link. And she says to Link, "I am also the leader of the Kokiri." And she pointed to the kids behind her. And she says to Link, "We are the eternal children of the forest. And what you see here is all that remains of us. We were once great in numbers, but over the centuries, many of us decided to leave the safety of the forest and then wander out into the world and grow up." Then she asked Link, "Do you know who you descend from?" And Link says, "No, I don't know who I descended from." And then she says to Link, "Maybe one day I will tell you," she says to him. And then she says to Link, "You look just like him." And then she says to Link, "I will help you. First, I see you lost your sword." And she tells Link of a grave in the cemetery. She says that the grave had belonged to the hero Time, and there's an ancient weapon, a sword with great power that can even repel power from the Triforce. She says its name was the Sword of Evil's Bane, or the Master Sword. And then she says to Link, "Well, Link, I will help you get near the area." She pulls out a wooden recorder, and she says to Link, "I will play a magical tune that will teleport you to the Lost Woods that's near the cemetery," she says. Then she starts to play the recorder. And then the brilliant flash of light, Link disappeared. He was teleported away, and soon he arrived at the Lost Woods. And now he wondered where to go. But then suddenly, Link heard some ruffling in the bushes. A small group of moblins had come out. Link, with no sword, was forced to use his boomerang, and he threw it at the moblins, and it only knocked out the moblins. It didn't kill them. But before the boomerang hit the last moblin, that moblin chucked a spear at Link, and that spear hit Link right in the chest, dangerously close to his heart. After the boomerang knocked out the last moblin, Link was able to catch the boomerang, and then he stumbled through the woods. He was losing a lot of blood, the spear still buried in his chest. Eventually, Link sat down by a tree, and then he lost consciousness. It was unknown how much time passed when Link regained consciousness. He had noticed that he was not in the Lost Woods anymore. He was in some sort of building, and he looked around him. It was some sort of little infirmary, and there, standing next to him, was a monk. And he says to Link, "Okay, it's okay. Take it slow, take it easy." And then Link says, "Oh, what happened? How did I get here? Who are you?" And then the man introduced himself. He says, "My name is Brother Amos." And he goes on to explain to Link where he's at. And he says to Link, "You are in the hidden monastery in the Lost Woods. We found you. You were almost dead, and we used very powerful magic to heal you," he says to Link. And then as Link sat himself up in the cot, he suddenly felt a twinge of pain, and he says to Link, "Take it easy. Even though we healed you up pretty well. You're not 100% better, he says to Link. And Link says, Thank you. Thank you very much, dear brother. And then the monk says, I will tell the kitchen to bring you some food so you can regain your strength. And Link said, Thank you to the monk. After Link was finished eating, then Link slowly gets up from his cot and starts to get dressed. The monk had returned with a bottle of some sort of red potion, and he says to Link, Link, drink this. This will completely restore you. So Link thanks the monk, grabs the bottle, opens it, and takes a whiff of it. It smelled horrible. And then Link looks at the monk and he says, Well, bottoms up. And then he quickly gulps the entire potion. It was foul tasting too. And then the monk says, You will be fully restored of health and vitality within an hour or two. And Link thanks the monk. And then the monk says, Come with me, my son. The abbot wants to see you. So Link followed the monk, and Link eventually meets the abbot of the monastery. The name of the abbot was Abbot Costello, and he says, welcome, young man. And then Link introduces himself and explains what his mission was, and the abbot says, We can help you somewhat, he says. And he goes on to explain to Link that the only way to kill Ganon is with the silver arrows. And he says to Link that they have the silver arrows. And another monk brings a small chest. He opens it up, and inside were several silver arrows. Link quickly grabbed them and put it in his quiver. Link thanked the abbot, and the abbot says, There is one more object we shall give you for aid, he says to young Link. Then another monk enters the room with a small chest. He opens the chest to reveal a big ruby. Link grabs that ruby and he sees a fiery light emanating from the center of that ruby. And the abbot says, That there is Solace Fire. And then he goes on to explain that that sacred relic emanates a powerful fireball that can destroy anything around it, including evil spirits. And then Link says, Wow. And then the abbot continues, You will need this relic to protect you from the evil spirits that roam the graveyard, he says. And then the abbot says to Link, All you have to do is hold it up in the air, and when it lights up, its very light that it emits will keep evil spirits at bay. Link thanks the abbot for the relic, and then the abbot says to Link, Listen to me, Link. I know where you're going. You are going to the Shadow Temple. And let me just tell you, I don't know how Princess Zelda was able to brave the terrors in that place to hide the fragment of the Triforce Piece of Wisdom. And he goes on to say about the dark history of the Shadow Temple, how it was used by the Sheikah to torture enemies of the king and other dissidents of the kingdom. And he says to Link that that place is crawling with so much evil energy that the dead can't rest in peace. And then the abbot informs Link that the only way to get into that temple is through Solace's fire. And then Link thanks the abbot, and then the abbot tells Link one more piece of information. That information was how to navigate and get out of the Lost Woods. Link thanks the abbot and all the other monks, and then before he leaves, the abbot decides to put on a prayer service for Link to help him on his journey. They all head into the chapel, and there the abbot grabs his crozier, and Link noticed that his crozier had a very beautiful, distinct green gem on it. And then the abbot begins his prayer service, and Link notices the altar. It was like any altar. It had the image of Mithra slaying the bull. And then the abbot concluded his prayer service. Link thanked all of them, and he went on his way. Well, Link finally got out of the Lost Woods, and it was almost nighttime. He made his way to the dreaded graveyard, and he remembered what Saria said about the tomb of the hero of time. And Link was now feeling the presence of evil spirits. He grabs the gem and he holds it up in the air. The gem glowed with firelight, and soon Link can see that the evil spirits were visible and frightened by the light that was being emitted by the relic. Well, Link found a huge boulder and he saw the inscriptions on the boulder, but it was so faded that you couldn't barely read it. All he could make out was the word time. And then Link wondered how he was going to move this boulder. And then he decided to give it a try. Unbeknownst to Link, he had a method of moving it. So Link put both hands on the boulder, and then suddenly Link felt a power come over him. He did not know it. It was coming from that bracelet he found inside the first labyrinth. And soon he moved the boulder like Hercules. And then Link quickly realized that the bracelet he had on gave him the super strength to move that boulder. Link used the relic to light up the darkness of the grave as he was going down the stairs. He soon entered a chamber that was dark. Then he decided to see if he could use the relic to light up the torches if there was any around. And then Link clasps the ruby and then does a throwing motion to the ground, and suddenly a bright ball of fire spreads out and lights up all the torches that were nearby. It illuminated everything. And then Link saw a tomb straight ahead, and on that tomb was a giant marble slab, and on that slab was laying a dead warrior who was in armor, and that dead warrior was also holding on to a sword. That sword was covered in so much dust that it was hard to tell if the sword was metal or stone. Then Link read the inscription on the slab, and the inscription reads, "Here lies the hero of destiny, who has descended from the hero of time. He, like his ancestor, wielded the Master Sword on Cataclysm's eve and destroyed Ganon." And then Link reaches for the sword that was on top of the dead warrior. He gently got it out of the decayed grip of the dead warrior, and then Link held the sword. And then Link raises the sword in the air and strikes it against the stairs leading up to the tomb. And sure enough, the layer of dust and dirt come crumbling off, revealing a beautiful, shimmering silver blade and jeweled hilt. Link holds up the sword by his face, and suddenly he can feel some sort of power emanating from that sword, and then the sword began to glow with an orange light. Soon Link exited the hero's tomb, and sure enough, the ghost came in for an attack, and like if it was instinct, Link just pointed the sword at them, and suddenly, to his surprise, the sword began firing beams of energy. The ghosts were destroyed. Then Link makes his way to the eerie Shadow Temple. Once he was inside, he saw there was a pedestal, and surrounding that pedestal were a huge untold number of torches. And then Link knew what he had to do, and he used the relic to light the torches, and sure enough, it worked, and the giant stone doors of this dark and evil temple opened up. Link had to muster every amount of courage he could as he walked through the mold-covered stone floors of this temple. He had to avoid all the traps that were still functioning. He could see prison cells still bearing the remains of their occupants long since dead, now haunting the halls. And he also encountered everything else from Stalfos to creepy, decayed-looking zombies with scary wooden masks on their face. Well, finally, Link made it to the Chamber of the Guardian. And this Guardian was a creature called Digdogger. It resembled a giant floating jellyfish with a giant eye. And Link used his newfound weapon, the Master Sword, to shoot bolts at its eye. Oh, it hurt the creature greatly. And then Link quickly ran and took a swipe with his sword at the creature, killing it. As the creature was dead, Link went into the chamber and got the final fragment of the Triforce piece of wisdom. The remaining piece appeared suddenly, and Link put the final fragment together, and finally it was completed. The Triforce piece of wisdom glowed green, began spinning around in a fast circle, and vanished. Once the fragment was assembled, Zelda could sense it. And then upon sensing it, Zelda communicated telepathically to Impa. And then Impa said she was going to relay the message to Link. As Link had exited the Shadow Temple, the sun was rising again. He felt relieved. Suddenly, Link can hear Impa's telepathic communication. She says, "Link, listen to me. You have finally assembled the Triforce piece of wisdom. Now you must find the Admiral Seer. He is Korok like me, and he can find the exact location of Ganon's tower in Death Mountain." Link acknowledges it and heads to where Impa told him to go, to the very center of the kingdom. There, Link encountered a rock wall. He didn't know what to do, but the seer knew he was there, and he used his power to open a doorway within the rock wall. And he says to Link telepathically, "Come in, young man. I have been expecting you." Well, Link enters the portal that opened, and it closes behind him. And Link was in a cave that shimmered with emeralds that were all over the place. And Link made his way down the path until he reached a central chamber, and there he could see the Admiral Seer. He was a man of great age. He was bald on top, but he had long curly hair in the back, and he also had a long curly beard. Both beard and hair were white. He was clothed in emerald robes, and he says to Link, "Oh, come in, young man. I've been told about you by Impa." And then Link comes closer, and he saw in front of the seer a small table, and there on the small table was a huge chunk of uncut emerald. And he says to Link, "I will use my power to find the exact location of Ganon's tower. Sit, young man, relax. You had a long and perilous journey." As Link sat down in front of the seer, he noticed that the seer was blind. Then the seer began to work his magic as the giant chunk of uncut emerald began to levitate. And then the seer put one hand on one end and the other hand on the other end. It was not touching the emerald, but green energy was coming from the hand and touching the emerald, causing the emerald to spin faster and faster and faster, and the emerald began to project almost like a holographic image of Ganon's tower. Link's face lights up with excitement. He says to the blind seer, "It's working. I see the tower." Suddenly, a phantom hand of bluish grayish skin with large claws comes out of nowhere, smashes the giant uncut whirling emerald, and suddenly there was a violent gust of wind that emanated from there. After the spectacle was over, Link says to the seer, "What the heck was that?" And the seer said to Link that it was Ganon. He knew that he was going to find the location and stopped him. And he says to Link that Ganon was once a very powerful wizard when he was still human thousands of years ago. And then Link says to the seer, "Just great. How I'm going to find Ganon's tower." And then the seer says to Link, "Well, young man, there is one other way. Since you possess the piece of the Triforce, let it guide you, since it will surely be connected to the other piece of the Triforce." And then Link thanked the seer, and then he departed. As Link made his way to Death Mountain, he had spotted a few bokoblins causing trouble. They have captured a little fairy, and Link jumps into action and slays all the bokoblins, and he frees the fairy from the sack. The fairy was very thankful. She introduced herself to Link, and she said to Link that her name was Sprite, and that she would stick with Link to help him on his quest. Link thanked her and tried to send her on her way, but she was very insistent. Oh, Link journeyed on with his new traveling companion until they began to climb the perilous Death Mountain. They finally reached the peak in an area called Spectacle Rock, and Link did what the old seer told him. He let the Triforce piece he had guide him to the other Triforce piece, and finally he made it to Ganon's tower. And then Link goes inside Ganon's tower with the little fairy. And sure enough, he had faced the horrors of Ganon's tower. All of Ganon's minions were there, but Link was fearless as he was taking them on and taking them out. During one such scuffle, Link was badly injured, and Sprite helped him by using her magic to heal him. And then Link thanked her, but soon as they were arriving to the center of Ganon's tower, Sprite says to Link, "I can't go any further. The evil energy emanating from there is too great." And then she wishes Link good luck, kisses him on the nose, and flies off. Link thanks her for her help, and then he goes in to the central chamber. And there he saw the giant jar of evil. It was massive. It went to the very ceiling of the central chamber, and inside it was whirling purple smoke. And there he saw on a pedestal beneath it the red glowing Triforce piece of power. And then Link heard Ganon's evil laughter echo through the chamber. And the piggish Ganon appeared before Link. He was tall, well over 7 feet, wearing a red leather vest and red baggy pants. He began to shoot energy bolts at Link. But Link used the Master Sword to block the bolts from hitting him, and then deflected it back to the wizard ×3. Then Link proceeded to shoot Ganon with the energy bolts from his Master Sword. Finally, Ganon pulls out his trident, and him and Link began fighting each other. Link just couldn't do it. Ganon was clearly way bigger than Link and a superior fighter. So Link quickly retreated to the recesses of Ganon's chamber. He had to get Ganon with the silver arrow. It was his only way of defeating the evil demonic entity. So he hid as Ganon was searching for him, saying to him,
"Come out and show yourself, boy. If you want to be the pretender and try to take me on, you can at least have the decency to face me."
Hiding behind one of the pillars, Link knew he only had one chance to do this. So he grabs the bow, grabs the silver arrow, and pulls back the string. Now Link waited for Ganon to get closer. And soon as Ganon was close enough, Link leapt out from behind the pillar and let the arrow go. Success! The arrow pierced the evil Ganon's black heart, and Ganon began to let out a scream as Ganon was being destroyed by a white light that was coming out of his body. There was nothing left of the evil wizard but ashes. Link ran to the Triforce piece of power, and he grabbed it. And then Link ran to the back of the chamber. There he saw the door to Zelda's prison, and he went through the door. There he saw the wall of flames. Suddenly the wall of flames disappears, and then he sees the beautiful Princess Zelda wearing a green dress, and Zelda smiles, and Link comes up to her and bows before her, dropping to one knee, saying, "Your Majesty, I am Link." a knight from Galatia. I was sent by your nursemaid Impa to rescue you. And Zelda says to Link, stand up. Let me get a good look at you. And then she says to Link, it is you, the one I saw in my dreams. And then she says, thank you, Link. You are truly a hero. Suddenly, appearing out of nowhere were the two Triforce pieces, and they came together. And Zelda says, at last, two of the three pieces of the Triforce are together. Soon the Triforce disappears, and Zelda looks at the back of her right hand where she had the same mark as Ganon. And the two corresponding pieces, the top half, which represented wisdom, and the lower left half, which represented power, were now gold. But the lower right half, which represented the piece of courage, was gray. And Zelda says to Link, that half has been missing for centuries. And then she says to Link, come Link, you must protect me on the journey back to the castle. It's going to be a very long journey. And Link said, yes, your majesty. And the two leave Ganon's lair. The end. Like and subscribe.